Welcome into the podcast. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to get a little bit more equipped in a biblical worldview. As always, listen, I would encourage you, if you've got children, take some time to take what you're learning here, break it down, and have a conversation with them about this stuff. These are answers that your kids need to have as they engage with the world. Now, last week we started looking at some of these theories that are out there that people want to propose to kind of refute the resurrection of Jesus. And last week we looked at the idea that Jesus, maybe he didn't fully die. And maybe he just recovered from his wounds in the tomb and he just woke up. So if you missed that episode, you can go back and pick that up. It's called the swoon theory, but it's pretty ridiculous when you think about the trauma that Jesus had been through and the fact that several steps were taken to confirm that he was actually dead. So today what I want to do is I want to hit on two more alternative theories that propose to try to prove that Jesus didn't rise from the dead. Now keep in mind, as we look at any of these, they are just possible theories, but no one ever offers any proof for them. No one ever says that, hey, there were historical accounts, for instance, with the swoon theory. There were historical accounts of a man that was beaten to a pulp, staggering around Jerusalem after Jesus' death, claiming that he rose from the dead. Nobody's ever claimed that. There's no historical record saying, Jesus didn't actually die. In fact, he was just staggering around, beaten to a pulp after, there's no evidence for it. So that's what makes these very weak arguments. Think of a defense attorney who knows that his client's guilty. There are witnesses, there's evidence, but he's got to do something to create doubt for the jury, right? So he makes up scenarios that are highly unlikely that he has no proof for. And so he's like, well, hey, listen, somebody snuck into, my client's fingerprints were on the weapon. People saw him at the scene of the crime, committing the crime. But here's the thing. Somebody snuck into his house and they put Elmer's glue on all his fingers. And then when it dried, they peeled it off real carefully. And that's how they stole his fingerprints. And they used a bunch of his social media pictures to use AI to produce a rubber mask that looks just like him. And that's what people saw. He put fake fingerprints on the gun and he was wearing a rubber mask. And so what the judge would say is, that's a nice theory, but do you have any evidence for it? Well, no, I don't, but it could have happened that way, right? And that's how these theories work. Maybe he didn't fully die. Well, is there any proof of that? No, but it could have happened that way. And so that's kind of what we're talking about. So today we're talking about two others. We're talking about the stolen body theory and the hallucination theory. And so some people just want to say, wait, maybe the disciples actually stole the body and then proclaimed that he had risen from the dead. And then some people propose what they call the hallucination theory. Maybe all the people who thought they saw Jesus alive were hallucinating, so they truly thought they saw him. That's why you got all these witnesses that are just like, yes, I saw him. But it wasn't real because they were hallucinating. So let's get into these. First of all, let's get into the stolen body theory. Again, pretty straightforward. The disciples took Jesus' body and in order to proclaim that he actually rose from the dead. Now, this was something that Pilate was concerned about and the Jewish leaders were concerned about because they had heard that Jesus had taught that he was going to rise from the dead. So listen to Matthew chapter 27, starting in verse 62. Matthew chapter 27, starting in verse 62, it says, "The next day, the one after preparation day, the chief priests and Pharisees went to Pilate. 'Sir,' they said, 'we remember that while he was still alive, that deceiver said, after 3 days, I will rise again. So give the order for the tomb to be made secure until the third day. Otherwise, his disciples may come and steal the body and tell the people that he has been raised from the dead. This last deception will be worse than the first.' 'Take a guard,' Pilate answered. 'Go and make the tomb as secure as you know how.' So they went and made the tomb secure by putting a seal on the stone and posting the guard." So the theory is that the disciples went in and stole this body. And it's interesting that Matthew actually records that this theory was out there from the start. But Matthew also records, get this, that that the guards were actually told, once Jesus had risen from the dead, the guards in Matthew chapter 28 were actually told to say that the body had been stolen. Listen to Matthew 28, starting at verse 11. While the women were on their way, some of the guards went into the city and reported to the chief priest everything that had happened. And when the chief priest had met with the elders and devised a plan, they gave the soldiers a large sum of money, telling them, "You are to say, his disciples came during the night and stole him away while we were asleep. If this report gets to the governor, oh, you're going to be in trouble. But listen, we will satisfy him and keep you out of trouble. We're going to run interference for you. You're in trouble one way or the other. Like you let something happen on your watch that was not supposed to happen. And so if you'll tell the story we want you to tell, we'll make sure you don't get in trouble with the Roman governor." So the soldiers took the money, it says, and they did as they were instructed, and this story has been widely circulated among the Jews till this day. So in a sense, this is the oldest theory. It was proposed right away, right after Jesus rose from the dead, but Matthew says that this whole story was made up to deal with the PR nightmare. So what are the problems with this theory? Well, the very first, most obvious one is motive. The disciples had just seen Jesus killed for the things that he was teaching and for claiming to be Lord and King. Yes, stealing the body so that you could claim that he rose from the dead would definitely make him look more divine, but what does that get you? What does that get you? Keep in mind the disciples were in hiding because they were afraid that they would be the next ones to be executed for this movement. But all of a sudden, they came out of hiding and they were declaring, "Hey, Jesus has risen from the dead." Now, if he hadn't really risen from the dead, what would be their motive to do that? They should still be afraid. But they weren't afraid of the consequences of taking that position, and they ultimately were all killed or tortured for that belief. So it doesn't make any sense to come up with a lie that you know is going to get you killed. After all, the number one thing that people are going to want to know, if you're going to make the claim that Jesus has come back to life, would be, is there proof? And if you have no proof, then you're in trouble. If no one else saw him alive, you're not going to be able to sell this idea. And you're just going to go down for it yourself. Some people have said, well, lots of people have given their lives for crazy religious lies and false religions and things like that. But how many people die for a lie that they know is a lie, that they made up? To think that all the disciples were willing to endure terrible hardship and torture, and for most of them, in the end, death, and none of them recanted on that story that he rose from the dead, it says a lot. And so they didn't have any motive for doing this. The second huge problem with this theory is just the guards. First of all, the guards were specifically put there to stop this whole concept from happening in the first place. A historian named Polybius, and if I messed up his name, I hope he'll forgive me. I think he'll get over it. Detailed this strict code of the Roman military, and he states that sleeping on your post could be punishable by death. So what's interesting about the story is that the Jewish leaders they were told to tell this story that the body had been stolen while they were asleep. And if it was true, what's interesting is that it could have resulted in extreme punishment or even death for them. Unless it was a story that both the Jewish leaders and the Romans liked in order to blame the disciples and downplay the idea that he could have risen from the dead. So basically, the result for the Roman guards was not at all what you would expect if truly they just fell asleep at their post and let something happen that wasn't supposed to happen. The only reason that they didn't receive the typical punishment that they would have normally received is because they needed the story in order to claim that he didn't rise from the dead. So the Roman guards themselves kind of debunked this. Truly, they would not have fallen asleep on the job. That was not something that they would have done, and they would have known if the body had actually been stolen. And so then the next thing is just witnesses. So some may think the idea that the gospel actually records this theory, that in Matthew 28, the Jewish leaders say, hey, here's the story we're going to tell, that maybe this was an attempt by the gospel writers to get ahead of the story and ascribe bad motives to the people who started the proposed idea. But you still have the problem that there would be no motive for a bunch of scared disciples to steal the body and claim that he rose from the dead. And you have the problem that there were so many witnesses who claim they saw Jesus alive. Paul says in 1 Corinthians that over 500 people at one time saw Jesus alive. That would be an event that should be able to be fact-checked. If I said 500 people saw someone kick a 75-yard field goal in a game 10 years ago, you should be able to ask me where that happened, who some of those people were, and you should be able to go back and check to see if those people would testify to that. The Gospels, especially the book of 1 Corinthians, was written within the lifetimes of these witnesses, pretty soon within the lifetimes. If hundreds of people saw Jesus alive, the body could not have been stolen. It's one thing to steal a body. It's another thing to bring it back to life and let everybody see it, which is what happened. So the witnesses are a huge problem. And many of these witnesses suffered persecution because of their testimony. If they didn't see Jesus alive, why would they want to be ostracized from their families, lose their jobs in that Jewish culture, and then have to flee Jerusalem, in some cases, maybe even die for their belief in a risen Savior? Why would they want to do that? So when you put the fact that they had no motive to claim that Jesus rose from the dead if they stole the body, and you put with that the tomb was intentionally assigned guards to make sure the body wasn't stolen, and you put with that all of the witnesses that saw a living Jesus, and you put it all together, it's very hard to see how this theory holds water. You also have an issue that no one ever revealed where the body ended up. Again, all of these theories don't have this closing evidence, right? Like, well, okay, so they stole the body. So where did it end up? And nobody ever said. I love what Chuck Colson says. If you don't know Chuck Colson, he's started the Colson Center, amazing on biblical worldview, just fantastic. But he had a life-changing event when he went to prison for the Watergate scandal back under Nixon. And so that's a long way back for some of you. You have to get your history books out to see what I'm talking about. But here's what he said. I know the resurrection is a fact, and Watergate proved it to me. How? Because 12 men testified they had seen Jesus raised from the dead, and then they proclaimed that truth for 40 years, never once denying it. Everyone was beaten, tortured, stoned, and put in prison. They would not have endured that if it weren't true. Watergate embroiled 12 of the most powerful men in the world, and they couldn't keep alive for 3 weeks. You're telling me 12 apostles could keep alive for 40 years? Absolutely impossible, he said. Now, all right, before we jump into the next theory, I want to jump into a new segment that I'm calling the Facepalm of the Week. We'll see how this goes. If you guys like it, we'll keep it. If not, we'll do something different. But I'm going to point out a post, a meme, or a news story each week that just makes you want to do a facepalm because it's off biblically. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to start with this one meme right here where they're trying to make the case that Jesus wouldn't charge for healthcare. Now, obviously, Jesus healed people for free. That's part of what made him so appealing to the masses. It caused people to want to come and listen to what he had to say. And obviously, this wasn't Jesus's profession. He wasn't a doctor. He was a miracle worker, okay? And so his profession was really reaching people and connecting people back to the Father. Now, obviously, the Bible talks about helping the poor, 100%. But the Bible also talks about taking personal responsibility for yourself and for your family. So the meme is kind of only telling one side of the story from a biblical perspective. It sounds good, but it's a surface argument. In order to give away health care, doctors still have to get paid, right? And so we're going to give away health care, but who's going to pay the doctors? And with all the training that they do, they should be paid well. So someone has to pay them. And what people will say is, well, then the government should pay them. And when we say that, then we're stepping into socialism. The Bible never supports socialism. You can go back and check out my episode on that. You can pick up my book, Christ and Culture. And so a system where people pay for their health care, but there are provisions to help those who are in need is probably the best system. But as always, the Bible would expect that helping someone in a situation like that would come with accountability for doing your best and helping you better your situation so that this isn't going to be necessary for the rest of your life, if it's at all possible. And that's the difference between the way Christianity sees helping people and the way the government sees it. The government typically does not require enough accountability, and so people end up continually taking assistance when they could help themselves, which is bad for everybody. The problem is we see that as, oh, that's so loving when we do that, when we just help people and we don't ask any questions, we just love and we just help. And that's great to be loving. That's a great motivation. But it's bad for everybody. It's bad to raise generations of people who just think that somebody else should take care of them when they are able, if they are able and when they are able. So this meme earns a facepalm for trying to make a point, but only telling one little part of the story. All right, let's get into the next theory. We're going to do two more next week, but the last one we're going to do today is the hallucination theory. Again, this one says that people hallucinated or they thought they saw Jesus alive. And the argument is they were under emotional distress after seeing him crucified, them possibly facing execution or persecution themselves, and that they were expecting to see him alive, right? Because of the things he said about rising from the dead. And so they just imagined that they were seeing him. Kind of like after somebody dies and, you're just kind of passing somebody in traffic and you go, oh man, that looked like that person, that loved one that I had that passed away. And so, that's the idea, is all these people were hallucinating, all of these witnesses. Now, this one might be the weakest theory that people propose to refute the resurrection. So what are the issues with this theory? Well, first of all, I'm going to say witnesses again, but witnesses in various contexts. Jesus appeared to the women returning from the tomb. Jesus appeared to a couple of his followers on the road to Emmaus, and he ate with them. Jesus appeared to his disciples with Thomas and without Thomas, and encouraged Thomas when he was there to touch his wounds. Jesus appeared to Peter on the beach and ate with him. Jesus appeared to over 500 other people. The entire group in each of these situations over 40 days would have had to have the same hallucination. And that, of course, presents a psychological problem because by their very nature, people don't have the same hallucinations at the same time. And again, these took place over 40 days. They would have had to continue to have these hallucinations for 40 days. The second thing is just this, physical interactions with him. When Jesus appeared to Mary Magdalene at the tomb, she evidently hugged him when she realized who he was, and he says, "Don't cling to me." Later in John chapter 20, it says that Jesus appeared to his disciples with Thomas there, and again, he said, "You can touch my wounds, my hands, my side, and see where I was pierced at the crucifixion." In many of those appearances, as I've already pointed out, Jesus ate with people. He was physically there. John says at the beginning of 1 John, he says, we physically saw him and touched him. And so you've got these physical appearances. It's physical, it's tangible. It's not just a hallucination. And then the last thing is just really key is where's the body? Right? This is not the stolen body argument. This is the hallucination theory. So if everybody hallucinated and this started catching fire, and you can see in Acts chapter 4 and Acts chapter 5 that the local authorities were just like, how do we put this movement down? We are so sick and tired of this whole Jesus thing. Just go to the tomb. When Peter and John stand before them and say, hey, whom you crucified, he rose from the dead. All they have to say is, no, you guys are delusional. Let's go open up the tomb that still has the seal on it. Now, I guess you could combine these two theories, right? Like they stole the body and they hallucinated, which is really weird. They know he's dead. They saw his dead body. They transported his dead body, but they're hallucinating that he's alive and they're believing it. And so at that point, you're just getting really, really ridiculous. And so this one, really, really hard to hold water because, again, the body would just be sitting in the tomb if everybody had just hallucinated and and thought they saw him alive, and really he wasn't. And so that's the stolen body theory and the hallucination theory. What do you think about these theories? Do you think if somebody looked at you and said, hey, this is what I believe, I think that these are true, and so therefore I don't think that Jesus rose from the dead, do you feel like you could explain these clearly and quickly? Next week on Good Friday, the Good Friday edition, we're going to cover these last two. And so I just want to say thanks for joining me. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast, especially on YouTube. Make sure you hit that like button, and we will see you next Friday.